Welcome to Hell is like the best title I have ever heard at any conference ever. Um, it should be a horror movie. It should be anything. It should be, I've got a Clash shirt on, but I'm willing to put Hell Welcomes All on it on the front if you like. I'm Harold Goldberg. I'm the president of the New York Video Game Critics Circle and the founder of the New York Game Awards. I also happen to be the games critic for the New York Times. And this is Drew McCrory. Do you want me to introduce you? Because there's an awesome bio here. Or do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, you can read what they wrote for me. I'm sure it's going to make me sound good.
I mean, the first thing I want to say, even before I introduce you, can we just yell out games? Can we all just yell out accessibility? Yeah, great, because this is really a cool and important subject. And Drew McCrory is the senior lead of UX and accessibility at Blizzard. Especially, he's the lead accessibility designer for Diablo IV, where he and his team design, test, and refine accessibility features to ensure players of all abilities can fully experience the game. Their work spans visual, physical, and audio support with a commitment to making Sanctuary a welcoming world for everyone. And Drew, with my research cap on, I began to notice more accessibility options for players about 10 years ago. And in 2018, Microsoft released its adaptive controller, and the newer tip device lets quadriplegic folk use their tongues to play. In software, AAA games like Destiny 2 and The Last of Us have accessibility features for, say, the blind and hearing impaired. And at Blizzard, accessibility began in a small way back in 2012 with Diablo III, but it really ramped up with Diablo IV. So, Drew, you've been at the Blizzard lead for that effort for some time. How did accessibility options for Diablo IV happen?
So it was actually a really interesting thing. When we start building a game, we create what these tentpole features are going to be. Like what are the key game pillars that we want to make sure that every feature that we make lands, in regards to. And we said, you know what, accessibility is going to be a key pillar of our game. So we need to make sure that everything that we're making across all of the different, design ideas that we have is still meeting that accessibility need. And we got buy-in from the top all the way down. So we're like, great, so our game's going to be accessible, which means that when we're creating new features, we ask, hey, can everybody use this feature? And if not, what can we change about the design to make sure that they can? And I know that is probably a very unique thing, but thankfully it is becoming more and more common in the games industry right now.
And not to change companies, but you were involved in this effort at when you were working on Destiny 2 as well, right?
I was, yeah. So I was the lead designer on Destiny 2 for the PC, and we had started working on it, and we were taking this game that was very console centric and trying to make it work for the PC audience. And they had all of these different features that enabled you to like have better target acquisition and all this sort of stuff. And we had to strip all that out for PC, but I wanted to make sure that we weren't losing all of those features that enabled players that might struggle to still have a really great time. And I always tell the story, we went to E3 that year, and I had a player come up with one arm, and he went to the options menu, he remapped a bunch of things, and then he absolutely demolished our demo. And I was like, I did it. He just came and played. And it was one of those things where it's like, no, I don't want this person to come in and play our game and feel like they're a person with a disability. I want them to just be a gamer. And he was. Like, the sessions for doing this was only like 15 minutes, right? And he came in, remapped everything, and then just blew the thing away. And that should be our target.
I mean, that's really cool. And at the New York Video Game Critics Circle, that is our mantra as well. We try to welcome everyone, but you have to be able to write, so you have to be able to play games. I just wanted to know, so Diablo is one of my favorite games. I like the horror genre a lot. But what in particular changed between 3 and 4 as far as accessibility goes?
So we started building from Diablo 3 as a baseline, but I had a laundry list of features that I was like, well, it would be great if we could add these things to Diablo. So my initial draft, I think, was 50, 55 items were things that I wanted. And this was, additional audio features or additional, physicality features and all this sort of stuff. And prior to Diablo 4, I was working on Diablo 2 Resurrected, where I sat down with people and I was like, all right, so this game is 20 years old. It's super crunchy. It's very PC focused. It is showing its age as far as what we expect the player to interact with. And I'm like, so let's sit down with the design leadership and decide what is the point of agency for the player. Like, what's the fun moment to moment? And anything that wasn't considered the fun in that moment, well, like, hey, then that means that we can be flexible with what we're asking the player to do. So, for Diablo 2 Resurrected, we added things like auto potion, because maybe having to hit the button to use a potion wasn't the fun of killing monsters, because Diablo is a fantasy game about selling your overpoweredness and mowing through demons in hell and that sort of stuff. And popping potions shouldn't be the end all as to whether or not you feel like a hero. And we use that as the basis for going forward to Diablo 4. So we shipped the initial game with like 50 features, and since we're live ops, we've been able to add a ton more.
Yeah, so the accessibility community says nothing about us without us. How is the community involved with these features in Diablo 4?
So the community in general has been amazing. When we launched, I was like, great, so I'm going to become super active on social media despite really not liking social media at all. But I wanted folks to have a touch point to be able to say, hey, here's areas where I'm having problems, and are there areas that, you guys can work to help us? So I became active on Twitter. We have an accessibility at blizzard.com email, so folks can just reach out directly to me. I'm in a bunch of Discord channels with players that have disabilities, so they can just talk to me about where they are in their journey and what their current issues are. And then I use that to draft a gigantic backlist. Like the first big feature we added post-launch was WASD controls, which was a really big motor need for a lot of users. And that became the most important thing for us to make after ship, because it was the single most requested feature from the audience. And
Can you describe exactly how one would use that then?
so WASD controls basically, as opposed to using the mouse to navigate or using a controller stick to navigate, the players can use bindable keys on the keyboard. So, we call it WASD because, we just defaulted to WASD to mirror, FPSs, but players at that point can remap those buttons to anything, like an Xbox adaptability controller or something like that. So we're basically enabling players to meet the need of basic movement, regardless of what their physical capabilities are. So there's a lot of players, that, like, even think about if you have, nerve issues in one of your arms and you can't hold down an analog stick for an extended period of time, that prevents you from using a controller. And you might think, oh, well, that doesn't take a lot of attention, but it actually is a really big deal for a lot of users. So, part of that accessibility journey is remembering that we can't take our capabilities for granted, because there are a lot of users that don't have those capabilities, and things that we think of might be simple are in fact not simple at all.
So beyond that, what were the top requests from the community?
Well, the next big one was blind navigation, right? So I had a humongous amount of players who were fully blind and using audio cues to mentally map the overworld of our game, which is gigantic. Right? But they were doing it, and they were playing through the game. And like, we had a fully blind player beat Uberlilith, which was like the big pinnacle content at the time. And I'm like, oh my God, you managed to do that and navigate the world. And he's like, yeah, and it took a long time, and it was not great. I'm like, awesome, let's work on that. So we began figuring out how to create basically like a sonar system to allow players to navigate throughout the world. So players would get their quest, and they would receive audio pings that would direct them through the world and then get them to the location that they needed to be to complete the quest. That, in conjunction with our very, very verbose screen reader, allowed them to get all the information they needed to actually complete quests in the game. And like, my big concern was like, well, I don't know if it's good enough. So I blindfolded myself, and I'm like, cool, if I can complete quests, it'll definitely be good enough for people that do this every day. And I was like, oh my God, this is so not gonna work. And I remember when I was first testing it after our first draft, I was very worried, but I did. I picked a quest that I knew was on the opposite side of the world from where I was, and I did it fully blind. I got there, I completed it, and I was like, oh my God, we did it. Oh my God, we did it. And it was such an exciting moment. And getting to bring that to the community has been awesome because they're like, oh my God, thank you so much. And this was stuff that they were doing already, but now they could just play it like a gamer and not have to go through the rigmarole of like, all right, well, so now I need to just like, brute force my way through it. I can just play. And I'm like, exactly, because I want people to just be able to play the game.
And what do you think still needs work and tweaking? We are talking a little bit about that before, but
yeah. So right now, blind navigation is built around our pathing in the overworld, but all of our dungeons don't use the same pathing data, and it's set up very weird. So we're still trying to crack how to bring that into the dungeons. Now, dungeons are much more linear than the overworld, so players are still kind of getting through it. We added like stopgap features like wall notifications. So like if you hit a wall, it sends you a notification, or like you get an audio cue that says, hey, you bumped into a wall, and that sort of things. That way players can kind of build that out more. But my big goal right now is figuring out how to actually bring the audio navigation into dungeons for players.
So at the New York Video Critics Circle, we have 35 members, and one of our writers at nygamecritics.com lives in the UK and is confined to a wheelchair, and he has written about accessibility challenges for us, particularly in the horror genre. So he sent a note, which I'll just read to you. He says, so for Diablo IV, I found the button remapping to be great, along with the options to switch between toggle and hold settings for certain actions. These are really good for those of us with motor conditions, and I feel the needs for folks like me are met there. There's also no text-to-speech options for in-game chat, where other Blizzard games like Overwatch 2 do have that option. Is that something you're potentially addressing?
That's actually already in game.
Oh, he missed it. Great.
So I guess my answer is yes.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Was that difficult to do? Meryl, perhaps was that day one, or is that something that came later?
It was something that came a little later. So again, since we're constantly looking at areas that we need to improve, like we always say that accessibility is a marathon, not a sprint, right? Like the reality is no team has enough time or enough budget to launch a game that is fully accessible. Honestly, I don't even know what a fully accessible game would look like because there is such a wide range of needs from the community. So we're always learning more, and we're always finding new ways to make our games more accessible. So like that was a feature where we're like, hey, you know what? I think this is an area that we can improve, and we added it to our list, and then we got it in. Because again, we're not going to be happy until everybody has all of the things that they need to just come in and play. Like, we're a game about becoming a hero and, battling demons in Sanctuary. And I always say it's like, the only reason somebody shouldn't play our game is because of a lack of interest and never because they can't. Like, that's really critical, right? That shouldn't be the reason why somebody doesn't play our game.
And you continue to iterate. So what are the things that you continue to iterate on?
Oh God, everything. Screen reader is a huge one. So, I mean, if you've played Diablo, you know that there's a couple lines of text in our game, one or two. Our tooltips are gigantic, but it's a game about collecting items. And what those items do is critical to how the players get that sense of power and that sense of, their hero fantasy. So screen reader is constantly something that we have to update as we make new UI screens, figuring out the right way for everything to kind of read and explain stuff. We actually recently added a feature to the screen reader because we realized that we had this thought that it would be really smart where players are definitely going to want to know if another player runs into the screen because they're like, oh, cool, there's somebody else here to play with. So the screen reader would interrupt itself and then read the name of the person that came in. But the problem is when players were trying to have like a really long tooltip be read in town, if anybody ran by them, it would cut the tooltip and then they wouldn't get that message anymore. So they were finding like random obscure, like faraway places to hide to actually have their tooltips read. I'm like, well, that sounds awful. So a bunch of people came, they're like, hey, Drew, can you please fix this because this is making us very sad? And I'm like, yeah, that's not how we should do this. So we added an option now where players can be like, oh yeah, we can toggle that on because I don't care about new people running into the screen. But again, just allowing players to have as many bells and whistles and options as possible to find what works for them. Like I never want to make an assumption as to what someone needs. So all of this, that we've built is in very verbose options menus, so players can find the right number of toggles to meet them where they're at.
So the game industry is very pro accessibility, and there's an initiative, I think called Game Accessibility Initiative, which tags games that are accessible. Can the game industry do more therein?
So what?
Not to make you the spokesman for all games everywhere at any time.
I mean, I think we can always do more. But when you look back 10 years, what work was being done in accessibility was very basic, right? Like games would have subtitles or would have colorblind mode. Though 10 years ago, colorblind mode was actually often colorblind mimicking as opposed to actually allowing players with colorblind features to see stuff, right? So like you would enable the feature and it would actually mimic what someone with that or like if like someone had deuteropia, like you would enable it and it would show you how they see it and not enable someone with deuteropia to actually see the content. So we're learning, but in general, as big games create more accessibility features, other games are going, oh, okay, cool. So those are features that games should have. And games are becoming more accessible as we now start setting new levels for what is expected in games, right? Like we need big games to have more accessibility because then everyone else will view that as the new bar, right? And Microsoft does a real good job like flagging, hey, here are the number of accessibility features or buckets of accessibility things that games have. Like I don't want a player to buy a game and then realize that they can't play it. Like that's a super, super shitty experience. We shouldn't be doing that to our players, right? But as we grow, like every game is just becoming more and more accessible. And when I look back 10 years ago and I see where we are today, I'm so thrilled to see that there's actually like competing teams in this space now trying to make their games more accessible. So it means that like what we see from an accessibility standpoint 10 years from now is going to be like vastly higher than where we are today, and that's super exciting.
It is exciting. That's why I almost want everyone to yell it out again, but I won't do that to you. But Hell Welcomes All is also the title of a pretty cool 15-minute mini documentary on YouTube, and it's quite well done. And at the end, and you mentioned this briefly, you ask the community to go to blizzard.com/research if they have any questions or suggestions. So as we wind down, I want to know who answers those, and have you brought any of those folks on to help as consultants?
We've had a ton of folks reach out, and it's been awesome. Like we've worked with a number of people in the community. We've brought them in for like user testing on new features that are coming online. Again, I appreciate how flexible my company has been with me talking to the community directly and not through a bunch of levels of obfuscation, which is not always the case. So I talk to folks daily that are in the community just playing our game. And they are like, hey, here are features we need. I'm like, fantastic, let's work on those features. But we bring them in. So like whenever we do user research testing, you'd be like, all right, cool. So we're adding a new feature designed for players with motor disabilities. So I have a big list of folks that have reached out with their specific needs. And I'm like, hey, let's go ask them if they've got time to come in and test drive stuff, right? Like that's the best way to do it. Like I don't have the disabilities of every person. I can make informed decisions about what we should target, but I need people that are actually in the hot seat with those issues to play test the stuff and then tell me if I missed the mark or if we're doing a good job. Like that's the only way we're gonna know for sure if our work is actually hitting.
So I like to be on time and on deadline at the New York Times, so we are just about to end this conversation. And Drew, I think what you're doing at Blizzard is hellishly heavenly, if you don't mind two adverbs. So thank you so much for coming down from New Hampshire to do this conversation with me, and check out Diablo IV generally, because I like it, and the accessibility options if you want want to. So thanks so much, Drew. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Great.
Thank you all.